Hello everyone, today I am going to discuss about the new topic event handling in AWT. In the previous lecture we talk about what is the difference between the application and applet programming, and we had also discussion with how to run applet programming, how many way we can write my applet program, whether we can run by using applet viewer or whether we can embed the HTML code in my applet class. So in this lecture I am going to discuss whenever we are going to implement an application applet program, and what are the graphical user interface. If I implement a graphical user interface, then when the event has been occurred, how to handle them, what has been the listener, what are the event class are present, and how to use my listener interface to handle this event. So first we have to know that what does mean the event model actually. The modern approach to handle the event based on delegation event model, which defines standard and consistent mechanism to generate and process the event. Let me take a simple diagram so that you can understand what I am talking about right now. Suppose I want to implement that kind of application, okay, and where this is my actually window, and window consists of, we already familiar with any application where we have a text box. For example, we have a text box, we have a label, and this is my text box. We have a button also, we have maybe some text field here, maybe some text field here. Here I am just talking about when I click on this label or I put some data in my text box, and if I click on, for example, submit button, what will happen? So if I click on button or if I click on my text box or text area or any list item, so when the event will be generated and how can I handle based on this, I am just talking about that thing. In concept it is very simple. A source is generated an event, whatever the source. If I click on my graphical user interface, if I click or if I give some input from keyboard, or if I mouse roll over my graphical user interface, then in my applet program, then what will happen, whether it is an event or not. So that thing I am just going to discuss. So first we have to know what does mean the source, how to generate the source. So suppose I click on the button, so this is one of the sources generated, and what kind of event it is. It is whether it is a mouse event or whether it is a key event or whether it is a text event or whether it is a focus event. So that kind of event I am going to discuss, and it is more one or more our listener is used to accept that what kind of event you have generated. So in this scheme, the listener simply wait until he receive an event. Once an event is received, the listener process the event and then returns. The advantage of this design is that application logic that process the event clearly separate from the user interface logic that generate those events. So we have the advantage is, in case of event models, the advantage is we have just separate this process. I have separated this process listener, I have just separated this process of event generator. So that means a user interface element is able to delegate the processing of an event to separate the piece of code. So that is the event model, and in event model, the delegation event model, listener must register with the source in order to receive an event notification. So what does mean the register, listener must be registered? I am just coming within a few seconds. So right now you have to understand that whatever the model we are just going to follow, so that first the event will be generated, and the listener will simply wait until it receives this event. Then what are the next step? The next step is whatever the listener, whatever the event generated by some, we can say some, for example, component, button or the text field or the text area, whether checkbox, whether radio button, whatever the component which are added in my graphical user interface, so that must be registered with the listener, with the source to receive an event. So this provide an important benefit, because the notification are sent only to the listener that want to receive them. This is the efficient way to handle an event that designed used by the original Java 1.1 version. Right now we are overcome this or eliminate this overhead. Delegation event model eliminates this overhead, because we don't want to propagate the containment hierarchy until it was handled by a component. So now what does mean the event actually? I have talked about so many theoretical part that you are getting more confused. Let me clear one by one what does mean event actually. So event actually is an object that describes a change in a source. We have seen so many when we are going to fill up my online examination form, or if I want to register any document in online, we have seen that whenever I have just added some data to this text box, for example ABC, just I have completed this data, I automatically move to the next field, and this field will be highlighted. Okay, it may be in that sense we can say lost focus, right? It will be some shadow that I am not going to access further this one. Okay, sometimes we have used that. I have used some mouse here in my GUI, and there is some changes has happening in my screen. Sometimes happen that I just click the button, I am going to the next page in my application. So we have seen so many common thing in my application. Here the event, I want to say that an object that describes a state change in a source. So here these are my source. So if I roll over his mount, here I have written submit, and it will be changed if I do it from my program accordingly, that it will change this color. So that means this is my source, and when the event is generated, then it will change his state. So from you have written submit here, then it will change to other color maybe, or the text will be changed, whatever we can do according to our requirement. So here I want to say that the event is an object that describes state change in a source. Other cause, an event is generated as a consequent person interacting with the element in a graphical user interface. Some of the activities cause the event to be generated by pressing a button, it may be entering a character via a keyboard. If I want to paste some, if I give some input in my through my keyboard and to my text field area, it may be happen. It may be happen select an item in a list, or clicking the mouse, many option can be happen, it depend on the event generator. So the only one thing, only one line we have to remember, that event is a object, nothing else. Event is a object and that describes the state change in a source. The next thing is we have to know what has been the source actually. So before that I want to add additional point regarding this event, that event not only directly caused by the interaction with the user interface, not only user interface by the user interface. For an example, it may be an event generated by a time expire of the page, a counter exceeds a value, a software or hardware failure may occur. So that is also an event. So it is not mandatory that all the time the user interaction is the only cause of generating event. It is not only the cause, but it may be happen that some other causes, but it is negligible. So most of the time we are thinking about that event is generated by user interaction, or whatever the event has been generated by interaction with a user interface, whatever the screen we have getting in my applet programming by graphical user interface. I am just pressing the button or clicking on the button, or just put some text in my text box, or just click anywhere in my computer screen or window, then there is a change. So it means that some event has been occurred. So now the next point is, what is the source of an event? I have already discussed, but let me clarify this one so that you can get the clear idea. At the end I will discuss a complete program so that you can get that complete idea about what is event, what is the event listener, what is the source of event, what are the component I should add in my window. So like that. So right now we know event, right? We know now what is event source. Event source is an also object that generate an event. The source is an object that generate event. It occurs the internal state of the object change in some way. So most sources may be generated the one of the event, right? But one thing we have to remember, that whenever any source we are using in my applet programming, every source must register to the listener. What is listener? I am coming later. Must register listener in order for the listener to receive the notification about the specific type of event, whether it is a mouse event, whether it is a key event, or whether it is a action event, or whether it is a focused event. So what kind of event we have to inform the listener to receive the information. So for this we can write a simple method. For example, this is a general form. How we do write, I will discuss in details in a few seconds. Public void add, then what is the type of listener? Just I am writing type listener. Okay. What is the type of listener? And within bracket as an argument I have to pass that type of listener object. So type listener object. Listener object, for example EL. So here type is the name of the event. It may be a mouse click, it may be a mouse motion, it may be some action listener, it may be some action, it may be key. So here type is a name of the event, and EL is a reference to the event listener. For example, the method that register a keyboard event listener is called at key listener, right? And if I use a mouse, the mouse register motion listener is called at mouse listener. So that is the type of event. Okay. And What is a listener actually? So, listener is an object that notified when an event occurs. So, three things we have to remember. First, what does mean event? What is the source of this event, and what is the name of the listener? Listener is an object also, but that is notified when an event is occurs. The term or definition is so related. You can get the idea from this definition. Because listener, what is listener? Listener is the object that is notified, but that means listener has been notified by someone, right? So notified when an event occurs. So when an event occurs, so listener must be notified by this event, right? So event, event source, event listener. So the method which receive and process events are defined in a set of interface. The method that receive and process event defined in a set of interface such as those found in my java.awt dot event. So let me clear it. Java, small letter, java dot awt dot event. Right. For example, if I use the mouse motion listener interface, that method to receive two notification. One when the mouse is drag or move, or any object may receive and process both of this event is provide an implementation of this listener, right. So let me take some examples so that you can get the clear idea of what I am talking about right now. So I have just discussed about some event, right. Here is some important event. Here the left hand side we have just write the name of the event, what is the event class that has been generated, and what is the corresponding listener that is going to listen that particular event, right. So three term we have clear. We have just discussed right now what is the event delegation event model, and what is event source, and what is listener interface, right. So here we have no event source and event listener, or we can say listener. So when the event is occurred, so which event class it belongs to whenever an event is occur, I have just written in the left hand side, and corresponding what kind of listener is going to listen that kind of event I have just written in the right hand side. So there is no meaning that I have just used only one event and that would be listened by the only one listener. There is no specific rules. Okay, it depends on what kind of event it is arise in your program. It depends what kind of listener is going to listen that kind of event. That I will handle. That will totally depend on this stuff. Okay, so here look at this. Every time the left hand side, this is the name of the event, action event. So the class name is action event, and what kind of listener is going to listen, that is action listener. Please, this is the name. Please keep in mind that, make a note on that point, that you can always remember in this way that action, that is even my class. Okay, the two word at a time, you know, though this is the name of the class, and here at the end of every listener there is a action listener. So that means the listener word at the end, but at a time we can write action event, action listener, this one for the listener. Second, mouse event, mouse listener, and we have two listener for mouse event. One is mouse listener, another is mouse motion listener. So mouse motion listener means sometimes it may be happen in my program somewhere I am just moving my mouse, so some event is generated. What does mean event? When the state of the object is changed, so we can say that it's a event is generated, right. So we have a two event for mouse event. We have a two listener. One of the listener is called mouse listener, another listener is called mouse motion listener, right. And the third one is mouse wheel event. The listener name is mouse wheel listener. It's very simple to remember all those things. We have to just remember the name of the event class. What kind of event? Action event, mount event, mouse wheel event, and key event. So when I pressing some value from my input keyboard, so what kind of event it will be generated? So if I give some input to my one of my text box, and what will be the changes, whether I will automatically it move the cursor to the next value or next tab or next, we can say, component, whatever the may be component. Okay, it may be a text box, it may be a button, it may be a checkbox, it may be a text area, it may be a radio button, whatever. This is that kind of component that I am going to discuss. Okay, so key event is very important. Mouse event is also very used. Mouse event, key event, and also we use most of the time when I click on the button to submit something. So click event also important. So we can action event is very common to use in my event handling. Next, we have some other event also. Most of the time we use these three, and even we have a test event. The listener name is test listener. Window event, window listener. Sometimes it may be happen that if I click somewhere in my window, the window will be minimized. Sometimes it will be maximized. Sometimes I want to close. So window event is one of the important. Most of the time we are going to use window event also. Component event, the corresponding listener name is component listener. Container event, container listener. Focus event, focus listener. I have mentioned earlier. So focus event, so if I want to get focus on some component, or if I want to lose focus some component, based on that we most of the time we use the focus event. That is also important. Okay, we have some other important method who has to register. So here I have just discussed some event class. What is event class? Action event, mouse wheel event, key event, text event, window event, component event, container event, focus event, and corresponding listener I have just mentioned in here. Action listener, mouse motion listener. In this way you can use all those listeners. So here most of the time we are going to use action event, mouse event, key event, very popular. These are the very popular. Window event and focus event, right? So this event class is very important, and the corresponding listener class we are going to use most of the time. Yeah. So we know that every time where we are going to use any container, or you can say any method, we have to use some method, right? To perform the event handling, we have to use some method which is related to each of the component. What are the component actually? We have a button, menu item. I am just talking about this method corresponding to each of the component. I have just mentioned here. For example, button is a component, right? Menu item, button is a component. If I want to register this button item, or you can say with this component to the listener, the many classes provide the registration method. For example, in button I use the method public void add action listener. Now you can compare with my first add type, right? Add type. Here I want to add action listener. So name of the method is add action listener, and I have to pass the type, compare with this one, action, then listener. This is the name of the listener. I have just passed the listener object, and this is my body. Within this body I write some code. Based on the code I will perform some operation. So that means if I click on my button, so what is going to change, what is the function is going to perform after clicking on this button? that code will be written within this bracket, second bracket. So similarly, we have some other component which are most popular. If I use any menu driven program, so where if I click some menu, then we will get all the menu item. So like we use public void add action listener. Okay, please keep that in mind. We can use action listener anywhere according to our requirement. Here we have used the action listener. Here also use, in case of menu item, action listener, some action going to happen. In case of text field, we use add action listener. Even we can use add text listener. So we have just already mentioned that text listener is also text driven text listener, right? So that is also usable. If I use any text area, you already know what does mean the text area. So text area means we have some area where we can read some more of the document or more of the sentence like, and text area is very simple, just I am going to write one line sentence or 3 line sentence. But if I want to read more than 500 word, 200 word, 300 word, or you can say more than one line, we are go for text area. If I want to put some value, just only text area is needed. You are already familiar with HTML, so you know that what does mean the text area, what is text area, text field, that is you are already familiar with this one. And we already also know some of the component also. So checkbox you already know checkbox. So if I use checkbox, we have to use add item listener, because when I click on this particular checkbox, some item is added. So that listener, add item listener, if I choose something, this is my component, we use add item listener. If I use some list, then we are adding something. No, you can visualize that. Okay, when you are choosing some list, so that means I am using just add action listener. We can write like this, action listener L, or you can write A simply. So then after that, this is a body. So here I have just mentioned the number of component. So checkbox is component, choice is a component, list is a component, button is a component, menu item is a component, text field is a component, text area is a component. These are the frequently used component. And what I have discussed here, each of the component by which the event is generated, then every component must have some must have to register with some listener. Based on the listener, if any event is occurred by this component, then the listener is going to inform, and listener will perform according to the information generated by the event. So in this lecture, I have just discussed about what is event, what is the event source, and about some event class. We have so many classes I have discussed, event class and corresponding listener class, listener interface I have just discussed, and I have discussed some about the component, container component, just like checkbox, choice, list, menu list, button, text area, and I have discussed about some method regarding this listener, which corresponding method we have to register with what listener. For example, in case of checkbox, I have to use the add item listener, and in case of choice, we have to use the add item listener. We have to list add action listener. So in case of menu button, in case of key button, we have seen we have used some other. In case of button, we use the action listener. In case of menu button, we also use the action listener. In case of text field, we use add action listener. In case of text field, we have also used the text listener. Text area, we also use the text listener. So these are the name of the listener which are corresponding to the component, container component method. In the next lecture, I will discuss about some method related to applet. For example, we have to I will discuss about repend method. I will discuss about get document based method. I will discuss get code based method, and we use some application with the help of repend method. I will write some code of applet program. I will discuss in my next lecture with coding example also. Thank you.